What's up, guys? John here, back with another one for you. Now, I actually had a whole nother video that I recorded. I wasn't going to do another video like this because whenever this sort of PHP nonsense comes up, I usually just make a video to address it and then sort of move on. But I've got some pushback on this one, so I wanted to address it because, again, I think this is stuff that people see and they can sort of fall for, and I think it's misleading. So on my last video, I talked about the PHP usage statistics and how people are starting to say, well, it's all about traffic and so forth. And so this is one of the responses I got. It said, the logic of this video is pretty weak and largely avoids what the comment actually says. The person who made the comment is correct. If I make a site today in whatever language, then no one visits it for the next year. The idea that my site is making up the internet as much as YouTube, Facebook, etc. is ridiculous and obviously in relation to dev jobs, which is what I assume that comment was written in context to. Then again, obviously my site that gets no traffic is not going to generate any jobs as opposed to, say, Slack, written in PHP. So yes, having my no traffic site weighted the same as successful sites does not make for a good statistic and is a logical point. So there's a couple things here I want to address. I don't think it is a logical point, and I'll address why. But then if you want to do employment, let's just do employment instead of doing this sort of two-step correlation or whatever. And so I'm actually going to go through some of the employment stuff that we can look at. So let me just go through what I wrote back to him. So I said, no, it's not. It assumes that low traffic equals low opportunity for employment. That assumption just isn't true. I literally showed you a site in the video that goes against that assumption, and I could show you plenty more. In fact, my entire freelance career was building membership sites, and membership sites are generally sort of historically low traffic because anybody who's built a membership site or been involved with one knows if you have 1,000 members, it's maybe 10% of those people that are going to visit the site on a daily basis. That's just the way membership sites work. Now, but you're still getting paid for all 1,000 members, not just the 100 that visit on a daily basis. So literally every client that I worked with would probably fall into this category of low traffic site. There's very few that wouldn't have. And according to these people, those sites just don't count. So anyway, I said I could show you plenty more, but all you have to do is really think about it for 2 seconds. Do you think your local mechanics website gets millions of visitors a month? Not likely. People probably aren't visiting that site to read the articles. They only do so when their car breaks down. But when that happens and they do visit the site, that one visitor can end up spending hundreds or thousands of dollars with that mechanic. So low traffic, but high revenue. And businesses know, or a lot of businesses know, how important showing up for those key searches is. So they're willing to spend some money on someone who can help them do that. And you could go through industry after industry like this. There are tons of high margin industries out there. Insurance, jewelry, cars. I mean, you could just go on and on and on of industry like this where they don't operate off of getting a ton of traffic. They operate off of making sure they show up at the very precise time when someone is ready to buy, and then they operate off of high margins. So I continue. So again, the assumption that low traffic equals low potential for employment is just wrong. Sure, in some cases that's true, but you can't assume it's true in all cases, which means you cannot wholly disregard the usage statistics, which is what they're trying to do here. They're trying to disregard the usage statistic by saying that, well, a lot of these sites are low traffic. And beyond what I've said here, my point there is, well, if you're going to do that for PHP, then do that for ASP and do that for Node and Go and all these other things, because there's plenty of low traffic sites built using those languages and frameworks and so forth as well. So if that's the standard you're going to apply, then you need to do that across the board. And what do you know? We end up right back in the same spot. So again, I just don't think it's a logical argument. If you have any experience with actually building websites, I just think it's obvious that a low traffic website can still be a website that generates a lot of revenue and has a lot of potential for employment, which means you can't just wholly disregard them like they're trying to do. So that's sort of the first point. The second one is, if you want to just look at employment, let's just look at employment. So I looked up a bunch of stuff. and we'll hop over into Indeed. And I'm going to run through this pretty quick because I don't want to belabor this point too much. But so I did a search for PHP. I'm just doing it globally, not any specific locations. And you see 14,765 jobs. Okay. ASP.NET, 9,480. Node, 8,167. Golang, 1,659. So, those are some of the ones that people often bring up. And yeah, it's not 100% sort of correlation of 82% of the jobs out there are PHP jobs. I've never said that was the case. Okay. So, and then of course you have things like Python. Python's really big right now, so it has way more jobs than any of these other things. So that sort of makes sense. So again, just to be fair here, and so it's not like I'm just being a PHP homer and only saying like PHP is the greatest thing ever. I'm showing you the Python statistics. Python has a lot more jobs out there than PHP or really all of the other ones combined. And that doesn't surprise me given how popular it is right now. We could look at Ruby. Ruby has 1,000 jobs. Okay. Now, again, what often happens is people stop right there and they don't tell you the rest of the story. They just look at the tech jobs and that's it. But the thing about it is and I've said this, I don't know how many times, is that yes, in the tech job market, PHP is, doesn't have as many jobs as Python, and it's not as dominant over Node and Go and ASP as it looks when you look at usage statistics. I've said that. But the thing that people then ignore when they want to hate on PHP is they don't go to the other side of it and start looking at the freelance side of things. So if we go and look at freelance, then you can see when we look for PHP, there's 2,820 jobs on Upwork right now. If we look at ASP.NET, there's 181. For Node, 488. For Golang, there's 44. For Python, even though it's really dominant in the tech job space, there's only 903, which, isn't bad. That's about half of what PHP has or whatever. All right, and if you look at Ruby, there's 271. So as I've said, PHP is still really big in the freelance space. The other thing about PHP is, WordPress is just sort of dominant in that space. So you sort of have to also look at WordPress as well. And you see 3,949 jobs here. If we specifically go to WordPress developer, then you see 2,274. And not every one of these jobs is going to be additive to the PHP numbers because some of these will also include the PHP keyword as well, right? So we have PHP here, but a lot of them won't. And so there's a lot of these that you could add to the 2,000 whatever jobs there are in PHP. So there's actually a lot more sort of PHP related jobs. And you can probably do the same thing with Drupal and a lot of the other frameworks out there. Now, if we look at, say, you might say, well, okay, we should do that with the other one. So let's look at Python and let's do Django. What you end up with is actually less. You end up with 158 jobs. So, and some of these certainly could be additive, but if you start looking, you start to see a lot of these say both Python and Django. So I don't think it's as additive as the WordPress numbers would be. So again, at the end of the day, the numbers are what the numbers are. If you want to talk about employment, talk about employment, but also tell the whole story, right? Don't just focus in on tech jobs, because any of us that do PHP sort of admit, yeah, there's not as many tech jobs as, say, Python, or it's not as dominant, etc. But when you start looking at freelance, right, and the other side of the story, you see that there are generally a lot more PHP jobs out there, especially when you consider WordPress, than there are some of these other languages and frameworks and so forth. So again, I just want to give you the full picture and address these people. All of this sort of comes from, the thing about it is our side of it is all just sort of more of a defensive side, saying, hey, look, when people say, well, PHP is dead and PHP is this and PHP is that, and we're saying, let's slow your roll a little bit there, and we point out usage statistics, and they're like, oh, well, but traffic, and then you dig into the traffic, well, but employment, and you dig into employment, and then talk about freelance and this, and it's like, they just want PHP to be a dying language. Like, the more you get into it, it doesn't matter what argument you make, they're going towards PHP as a dying language. And it's just simply not true. And like I said in the last video, I actually think PHP is going to make a little bit of a resurgence here. I think PHP 7 has really helped in a lot of ways, and we might actually see some more of those tech jobs rising back up and so forth. So anyway, that's my take on this. I wanted to address this issue because it comes up and a lot of people see this and they get convinced by it, and I don't want that to happen to you. Now, of course, if you want to learn PHP, I have an entire curriculum over on Skillshare that you can dig into basically everything you could ever want to know about PHP, from starting with basic syntax and simple things like variables and functions and so forth, all the way through MySQL, prepared statements, object-oriented programming. I have a number of project-based courses for a login script, which includes user registration, a markdown-based blogging application, forms, sending email, etc., etc. So again, it's all in there. It's over 20 hours of PHP training that you can take. And the best part is you can get access to it for nothing. Just head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/PHP, and that will trigger a 2-month free trial of Skillshare for you. You get full access to all of my courses, including these PHP courses, plus 20,000 others that are available on the site. You'll get full access to them for 2 months. You can take as much of this training as you want and then simply cancel anytime before the 2 months is up, and you never pay a penny. So it's a really great way if you want to learn PHP or really anything over on the site to get that training, get those skills without having to spend a bunch of money to do it. So again, the link for that is johnmorrisonline.com/PHP. All right, guys, that'll do it for this one. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.